I'm a carpenter working at a brand new hospital. Yesterday I found black mold in a wall and was told by my superintendent to cover it up or I'd lose my job. What's the biggest thing you've had to cover up to save your job? I worked for a business registration company, and rather than having an automatic payment system, we took people's card information by hand over the phone. These scraps of paper weren't destroyed, just crumpled up and thrown in the bin. This bin was emptied into a community dumpster, easily available to anyone that wanted to look. I asked my boss for a paper shredder 3 times until he finally said, "I do not care about this. If you're such an angel, you will buy one yourself." Because of this, I would take as many as I could with me, collecting from all departments, and started burning them. I was fired for doing this. You should have raised heck. Wireless company's customer care call center. There have been a number of times when a customer calls in and says so and so told me that I would get X for free, or so and so told me that I would never be charged for Y. Notes support the claim. However, the credit was too big for my approval, so I would need to get my call center manager to approve the credit. You would always see the credit get denied and the note that showed documentation get erased or edited to deny the claim. The one time I brought this up to my call center manager and he told me, "If you want to keep your job, keep your mouth shut about this." The next day, my voluntary shift was approved and I moved from a MF95 shift to a Thursday, Mon 3rd shift, 10 p 7 am. My advice to anyone who calls customer service for your cell phone company, or any industry for that matter, record your calls. To get around that law about recording calls without authorization, when the agent answers your call, say, "This call will be recorded for archival purposes." I bet that gets sold listening to every day. Many times, the agent will agree and proceed with no issue. Dude, that crap is dangerous and it is a freaking hospital. People with already compromised immune systems just hanging out all over the place. Don't you dare cover that up. Frick your supervisor. I'm going to make some anonymous tips to the department today. Restaurant I was kitchen manager at had a huge roach problem, as well as black mold in the walls. I informed the GM that roaches were crawling on counters, in the cooler, and even fell in the sauces. You could see their feces around electrical sockets and in corners, and we need a crew in here to clean, set traps and to investigate the mold. He said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." Week later, nothing changed. I asked the manager if she knew anything about the problem. She said no. Went back to the GM and he bought some store fly traps and told me to put those in the problem areas. I said he must be joking. He closed the manager's room door and said that I was replaceable and if I pursued this further I would be replaced that afternoon. I needed the job and kept quiet for a while. Luckily 2 months later a customer had a couple roaches in her food and an investigation was launched by the health board. Now you know why Kevin Nealon won't take a dump at the Olive Garden. I work in quality assurance and I was told to only report the good scores and not the failing scores. I didn't do it and we had to suffer the consequences of failing to meet the service level. I just could not bring myself to cheat if our job is to make sure we're meeting quality standards. I'm guessing you weren't doing QA for McDonald's or Burger King. Ex-infection control agent here. There are forces at work far stronger than you or your boss. If that mold ends up killing people, it's your head at the chopping block. Be a bigger man and get it fixed proper. His super has to have a higher super that controls him. Frick his boss, get him fired and become a superintendent that saved lives. I was a manager at a Jimmy John's. My actual title was person in charge. It basically meant that I would either be in at 6 am opening the store or at 8 am to slice meats while the opener was there. I was third in command with a GM and an assistant manager above me. Let's call GM Chris and AM John. My store was pretty different from the whole stoner vibe JJ's gives off. I worked primarily with meatheads who only talked about working out, UFC, and really that was about it. I got along with them, but I was very different from them in personality. So, about 6 months into working at the store, we hire a girl named, we'll call her Becca. She's really cool and her and I immediately become really good friends because she was the opener and I was the meat slicer or vice versa, so there was a lot of time with just us two talking. About a month or 2 into her working there, she came up to me as I was slicing. "Hey, can I tell you something?" She seemed kind of upset. "Yeah, go for it." She ends up telling me that John, my AM, has been texting her a lot of really sexual crap, like asking how big are your T or how many guys have you fricked. I'm pretty pee off by this, so I tell her that I have to tell Chris our grams. She tells me that she'd prefer to tell him. A week goes by and she still hasn't told him. I finally tell her that I have to tell him. I tell Chris and he is really worried and pretty pee. He says that he is going to talk to John about it. Becca and I are now thinking, okay, well that's been taken care of, but now we are going to have to cover all of John's shifts after he gets fired. Well, John shows up to work the next day and the next day and the next day. I ask Chris what happened. I talk to him about it. Won't happen again. Did you write him up? No, because if I do that, he immediately gets fired by corporate. Okay, well, a month later, John is still texting her crap. Same crap happens. I tell Chris. He talks to John. Nothing. A few months later, same exact thing happens. I go to Chris and tell him that if he doesn't write him up or fire him, I will have to report to our owner, Nick. Chris and John have been working together for about 4 years at this point. Chris doesn't write him up or fire him, so I tell Nick about the situation. Oh, wow. Okay, I'll talk to Chris and John about this. Nothing happens again. I'm just thinking, frick this. I need this job, but I really can't let this slide. I told Chris that I was going to inform corporate. 3 days later, I show up for my shift, and I am immediately fired for wearing the wrong color shoes for our uniform. Unfortunately, I was a dumbass and didn't pursue any legal action, but I did end up getting the GM and AM fired. TLDR, I was a manager at Jimmy John's. My managers cover up another manager sexually harassing an employee. I get fired for threatening to inform corporate. I was a new server and I was taking care of a Sweet 16 party. They all ordered virgin daiquiris and I told the bartender before I rung them up cause I knew they would take a while to make all of them. I drop off the drinks and about 15 minutes later a few more kids showed up and order the same. I go to pick up the drinks at the bar and I notice they are in different glasses. I asked her why and she explained non-alcoholic drinks go in different glasses. My mouth dropped open and I told her all the drinks should have been non-alcoholic. I race back to the table and all the drinks are about gone. Then race back to the bartender and tell her it's too late to get them back. She tells me not to say a word. We got away with it. One kid commented that the drink tasted funny and I quickly took it away. Needless to say, the kids got very loud by the end of dinner. TLDR. I served booze to kids and the bartender told me to keep my mouth shut. This is probably the least harmful post in this thread. Part of my job is analyzing mold spores under a microscope, and one thing I can tell you is that just because the mold is black in color does not mean it's black mold. But by golly, hopefully it's not black mold. That can kill healthy people with bad allergies. I work in the restoration industry and have dealt with mold remediation for the last 8 years. Here is what you need to know about your situation. 1. There are no federal laws regulating mold at all. There are no laws that say how much mold in a building is acceptable, how many airborne mold spores are acceptable, and what kinds of mold are more dangerous than others. 2. I have personally done mold projects in 6 states, none of which have any laws regarding mold contamination. I'm not saying that no states have laws, but so far in my experience I have not found or heard of any states that do. As a side note, I will say that some states have mold remediation contractor requirements, but they only apply to things like how much insurance you need if your company is actively doing mold remediation projects. 3. The reason for the lack of laws is twofold. First, there are mold spores in every bit of air everyone has breathed since their very first breath. When trying to determine what levels of mold are acceptable, the industry normally says if the levels in a house are less than twice what the outside levels are, then they are considered at normal levels. The issue with this is the outside levels of mold change drastically from day to day and location to location. During inspections I have gotten levels anywhere from 200 spores per cubic foot to 5,000 spores per cubic foot in the outside environment. So if I test inside a house and get 2,000 spore per cubic foot, the results could be 10 times the outside levels or less than half the outside levels. 4. Black mold is just a buzzword that was used in the early 2000s and has no determination in severity of health threat. The term black mold comes from reports about stachybotrys, Stachybotrys is a type of mold that more than the average number of people are allergic to, and it affects people in lower concentrations than most molds. Stachybotrys generally grows black. The fact is, Stachybotrys can also grow in other colors and other molds can grow black. Color has nothing to do with severity. 5. In buildings the size of hospitals there are literally dozens of these kinds of leaks that cause mold to grow behind the walls. Many of these leaks are there for years until someone cuts into the wall and finds it, or the leak gets severe enough to be noticed. I tell you all this to say, there is nothing legally that can be done against you if you do nothing. You are not a mold contractor. You are not certified in mold remediation. Even when I do a mold inspection, I cannot say from a visual inspection whether or not something is mold. The only way to truly determine is through a mold test, and not one of the $10 ones from Home Depot. They are nonsense. The real dilemma you have is the moral one. You know that something is there. You know it's bad. Should you do something? That of course I cannot answer for you. All I can say is you have no legal obligation, only a moral one. Should remember this about Canada. Laws could be different. Seriously, don't cover that up. That crap can kill healthy people, let alone those in a hospital that are already on the skids. Surely you can contact some health department anonymously about doing an inspection for the mold. I work in a construction company, and I have to say that's pretty terrible standards to work by. I don't mean any offense to you, but as a superior, he should take responsibility, especially in an environment where sick people are being cared for. Sorry, I don't cover up mistakes at my work. I work with military and commercial aircraft. If one of my mistakes makes it on an airplane, hundreds of lives are at risk. I would rather get fired for making a mistake than to live the rest of my life knowing that my mistake killed people. The hospital likely has a compliance department that you can report this to. Many healthcare organizations even have an anonymous, third-party hotline that you can call to report things like this. Calling the compliance line to report, hey, there's mold in the wall wouldn't be an appropriate use of the line, but there's mold in the wall and my boss said to cover it up is. The hospital's compliance department will be interested in this and will not frick around about it. Recently licensed physical therapist assistant. In my first day working for this facility, their main physical therapist asked me to do like 4 illegal things. He wanted me to doctor a few notes on a medical chart, say I treated someone when I clearly didn't, medical fraud, do something that was against what I had learned. I said no. He was really pissed and was threatening my job, saying that's how everyone treats. Saying that if I didn't bill for my full schedule of treats that the facility would go broke. I still declined and considered myself done working there. They didn't call me to work for 2-3 months after that. Fast forward to now. 20 minutes ago I got a call from that same facility to work 5 hours tomorrow. That therapist was fired and investigated for fraud. The director of rehab resigned, and I've worked a few times since the incident and the place is running smooth. Don't ever comprise your beliefs for some douche unless you have kids and a wife to feed, then everyone will understand you did what you did for a reason. Wouldn't you feel like crap if someone you loved was sick and was rushed to that very hospital, only to die of something you knew about? Thanks for doing the right thing. This is a time when unions are good to have. Unions are goddamn important. This is just a good example. I worked for an automotive bolt fastener company. I was responsible for all the rejected raw steel we received. I worked with the suppliers to get replacements and get the bad stuff sent back. If it was under a certain weight, the supplier would tell me to scrap it at our facility instead of sending it back. Well, the president of the company found out I was scrapping rejected steel. Sees profit. He then instructs me to use the bad steel anyway. This is steel with structural defects, which makes it unsafe to make bolts out of. We are talking the fricking bolts that hold your wheels on. I never followed his instructions and had my high-low guys hide the stuff in the back of our warehouse. Listen, your car's wheels might fall off, but I had nothing to do with it. There must be a general superintendent or someone at your company's office that you can tell. Telling the union rep may not do anything. Heck, telling the local inspection agency may not do anything. But if the president of your company knows of this, she will know that this could really hurt the company in the form of subsequent lawsuits. It doesn't matter what needs to be shut down temporarily, but that needs to be repaired. Does the super work in your company? Is there a PM on the project that you can contact? Make an anonymous call to the project manager executive if you are afraid of getting fired. Most likely you won't get fired if you contact the right people. Seriously though, that super might be a good guy, but this is freaking negligent, incompetent and lazy. His license should be revoked. If you patched it, you share in that negligence, but you don't hold a license. Crap. Now I gotta go walk my job and make sure stupid shenanigans like this aren't going on. Thanks for getting me off my butt. His boss will frick him over and say he never told him. If his boss is willing to cover it up, he'll have no issues throwing him under the bus to save himself. Dude, I've been in the hospital numerous times over the last 2 years. I have a pretty crappy immune system, or so I think. During my time I've met people who were way worse than I was, and it really opened my eyes to how lethal things like this can be. If someone's body is already fighting an infection or something worse, then this could be something that ends up ruining their lives or killing them. I'm glad you're doing the right thing by talking to your union rep. I've learned in life that doing the right thing isn't always doing the easy thing. So props to you. I hope your boss gets canned for this. The karma gods will hook you back up down the road sometime. I was going to say call your union rep. Good man. You did the right thing. Let them deal with it. As someone who works for the laborers union, I can tell you, at least where I am, we don't let people put our guys in situations like that. When we find out about it, lawyers get involved and our audit team randomly picks that company to get their in-depth audit, which usually scares the crap out of them. When Health Inspector Miami replaces CSI, you can expect the following. 2 plainclothes inspectors are in a hospital room. Part of the wall is torn away. A hazmat crew is busy nearby. One inspector has red hair and is wearing sunglasses indoor. Inspector 1. Looks like they must have been aware of this black mold during construction. A crew must have seen this. Inspector 2 crouches down and leans into the torn away section, placing his tie over his nose and mouth. After BT nods and stands. Inspector 1. You thinking what I'm thinking? Inspector 2. After a beat. Yeah, somebody thought they'd save a little money. Beat while removing sunglasses. By covering this up. Guitar screech. Fade to title. Let me point out something here. If you don't report it in your name, you're fricked. Here's how this will go down. There is a record of the repair. There will be people who know of the repair. Hospital staff, your boss, etc. Basically you cannot deny that you made the repair. Next, what will happen is, at some point it will be discovered by someone else. Maybe not today, or tomorrow, but by someone. The hospital will investigate it. They will see, hey, didn't motherfucking cheap butt contractor do a repair on this already? Why didn't they report it? At this point, they'll figure out that you found it, that you never reported it, and know what your boss is going to say. He never told me crap about this. Suckers fired right now for covering this up. They will hang you. Your only option is to go to the hospital rep on the project and report it to him right fricking now. Edit. If you report it anonymously, when they investigate they will go back and again wonder why you never reported it. Again, see part about your boss hanging you. With regards to the record of the repair, your boss knows it was you doing it, so he knows anything that comes out about came from you. Edit 2. Good job OP. This is the right thing to do. Likely will be better if you go to another site anyway, since things will be tense between you and the boss now. Edit 3. Looks like someone else knew what was happening. Could have been the union rep calling it in too. Or someone else just knew about, maybe heard the boss telling you to cover it up. This shows, even if you could cover it up, you have no way of knowing if it got out there. Not saying you were ever going to, but keep that in mind if you ever consider covering something up in the future. With them not looking you in the eye, someone got crap on for this. You seem to think the hospital cares? From my experience with a major university hospital, they do not. Where I worked, the biosafety whatever committee just dismissed every situation. That 10-year-old piece of research equipment used in long forgotten bacteria, virus, and prion research, someone wiped down the outside. They heard a rumor that someone cleaned it, and crossed it off their list of stuff to think about. Later the guy with a high school diploma making poverty wages got to clean up the 10-year-old blood and guts, from unknown biological research, from inside it without PPE. So much circular logic. A part was wiped down. Thus the thing is clean. Thus it is sterilized. Thus they get a paycheck. True story. I tried to get faculty and staff interested in several situations like this. No luck. I'm a failure. I admit it. When I worked at the Royal Bank of Scotland on the stocks and shares admin desk, we would receive calls from individuals who had lost their share certificates. Most of the time these were inheritors of estates. Usually their mum or dad had died and they were trying to sort out the estate in order to fulfill obligations in the will. If the parent had several hundred shares in a company through RBS, they might be worth a couple £1,000s. So it was worth sorting out. Replacement share certificates are, by law, to be given by the dissenter group without charge. We, however, were told to tell callers that a replacement would cost £15, payable only by check. The checks, which trickled in through the day, would be put in a special envelope on the group supervisor desk, and at the end of the day all the supervisors, there were about 10 in the office, would put their envelopes on the desk of the manager, who would then see to it that the checks disappeared to the right place and were not added to the usual incomings and outgoings of the office. I worked at a billion-dollar hedge fund and was repeatedly told I had to lie to investors and put out risk numbers that were a bulls. We needed to understate it. There was no transparency, so no one ever knew. I asked my friend who works at one of the biggest asset managers in the world what I should do. He told me even if I do blow the whistle, no one would hire me because I'm someone who gets the firm into trouble. Worst case scenario, call some muckraking reporter at the local news station. They love this sort of stuff. And take pictures, video of the mold. Lots of it. This doesn't seem like a bad option either. If it gets lots of attention, it'll be difficult for them to fire you. Plus you have the Whistleblower Act behind you. If you're American, not sure about other countries. Check out your local whistleblowing laws too. And if they ever start making your life hard, that might count as constructive dismissal. That is, it's illegal to torture someone until they quit. Your union rep would know more obviously, but keep in mind that if they start treating you like crap, you can drag them back into the ring for another round. Worst case scenario, at least you've realized you work for a crappy company and you're better off leaving. As a civil engineer, working for a reputable company is extremely high on my list of priorities too. I never want to be in a situation like yours, where I'm torn between taking personal risk and putting lives in danger. Sounds like your heart is in the right place. I'd be proud to work on a site with you any day. Yep, I am going to have to agree with the others on here. You need to report it. That stuff is incredibly dangerous and in a hospital nonetheless. No bueno. You are doing the right thing by meeting with your union rep. Keep in mind that not all mold that happens to be black in color is black mold. Also, if it's not widespread, the repairs, although significant, aren't going to be nightmarish. I'll go with suck it up and report it. There's always a good chance this kind of company is just going to kick you to the curb when they are done with you anyway. And you don't want to feel bad about something you did to protect some butthole that just fired you no matter what you did for him. Don't be an idiot, please. Call the health department or city inspector. You'll get in a lot more trouble for covering it up than you will for reporting it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.